Hey church, happy Wednesday. It's day 4 of Holy Week, and this day is when Judas betrays Jesus. So the verses that we're reading from are in Matthew 26, 14, 16. It says, "Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, 'What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?' So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over." And apparently 30 pieces of silver back in those days was the rate that you pay for a slave. Directly before this passage though, we see the story of Jesus being anointed at Bethany by Mary. So I'm going to read that out too because I think it's important. It says, "While Jesus was in Bethany in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. 'Why this waste?' they asked. 'This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor.' Aware of this, Jesus said to them, 'Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her.'" Now there are actually a few days in between these two events because it tells us that in John. John says that it was 6 days before Passover that Jesus was anointed, and Wednesday is a day before Passover, so probably 5 days. But the way that Matthew puts it together would indicate that for him it's quite obvious that Mary's actions as she anoints Bethany were like the final straw for Judas, almost what tipped him over the edge in deciding whether or not to betray Jesus. And we can kind of see that because right after he finishes writing about Mary, it says, "What she has done will also be told in memory of her." It then says, then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests. So although there is time in between this, it seems like they're really, really interconnected. But maybe this is a question that comes up for you, like, why on earth would Judas betray Jesus? Like, how do you get to that point? And I've researched a lot about Judas previously and found that there's just absolutely nothing in the scriptures to say that Jesus treated Judas any differently from any of the other 11 disciples. So he is commissioned like the 12, is part of the 12. He's commissioned, he's given authority to drive out demons. He sees the same miracles that the 12 would have seen. He hears the Sermon on the Mount, he hears Jesus' teachings, and it's just an outrageous grace really that Jesus didn't treat him any differently to how he treated the other disciples, which is good news for us because we all fall short in ways both similar and different to Judas. So what drove Judas in that moment to betray Jesus? I can only think of one answer, which is just this sense of entitlement. And if we look at the anointing story, where Mary anointed Jesus at Bethany, John captures these extra details. He says, "But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. 'Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages.' And then John adds, 'He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, a keeper of the money bag, and he used to help himself to what was put into it.'" So to me, it seems that Judas has just got a really strong sense of entitlement, also shown in the fact that when he went to the chief priests, his first thing was, "Well, what will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" So just a few really quick words on entitlement. We're all way more entitled than we realise, me included. Entitlement is often driven by comfort and pride. And we only ever complain about what we feel entitled to. And so Judas complained because in fact he felt entitled to the money that Mary had lavished on Jesus. He wasn't able to recognise just an incredible outpouring of love and a life changed. He said he only saw what was being poured out as the stuff that he actually deserved because the money there should have gone to him. And entitlement stops us sharing in other people's wins because it focuses only on what we think we deserve. We'll never be grateful for what we feel entitled to. For us, it's just a payment earned, it's a right. And we've got so much emphasis on what we deserve and what's rightfully ours and the justice of that we miss out on the joy of giving and realising that actually what we deserve is not what Jesus chooses to give us. And entitlement is often disrupted by discomfort. So if entitlement is driven by pride and comfort, then it can be disrupted by humility and by discomfort. Because that breaks the cycle. It reminds us of God's gracious gift to us. And we see this in Mary because she took what she had and she used it to serve another Jesus. She poured out for him. And when we're truly living out a life of faith, we begin to see that all of the things that we have access to with the lens of, how can I use this to serve others, which is what Mary was doing. And so that's my challenge for you today. Where can you willingly put yourself into a place of discomfort in order to serve somebody else? Because we will never be grateful for what we feel entitled to.